Thank you, David. And Chair, just before we get started, I would like to make sure that legal counsel is with us. Um, I had a message from Brennan. He had to step away just for a quick moment, so I want to make sure he's been able to rejoin us.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
I can't hear anything. If someone is speaking, I'm not hearing it.
Nobody's speaking at the moment. Can you hear me right now when I'm
I
speaking?
can. Perfect. Thank you. I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I think we're just waiting for the clock to strike 9, and then Chair Clemens will get us going. Chair, I'm seeing 9. I think we can go ahead and this thing off.
Right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Consumer Protection, Public Relations, and Outreach Committee meeting. I'm Alex Clemens, one of your members. This meeting is available to the public via teleconference. Individuals listening to the meeting will have an opportunity to provide public comment, which we welcome, and will be assisted by a moderator who will be facilitating the teleconferencing process. For any members of the public participating via teleconference, and I understand we have at least one, please wait until the moderator has introduced you before you make your comments. And of course, each person will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. The committee welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it's our intent to ask for public comment prior to taking action on any agenda item. And if I forget to do that, please raise your hand on WebEx and you will be recognized. We also have Brennan Meyer here to make sure we stay within the legal guardrails. Today's meeting will be run according to the Open Meeting Act as required by state law. We plan to end today by 11 a.m. and I would like to turn things over to our Executive Officer, Greg Pruden.
Just want to say good morning. Appreciate everybody joining us for this meeting and looking forward to a good discussion today.
And while there is video evidence of this, I think we are required to do this anyway. I'd like to perform a very formal roll call. Alex Clemens, are you here? Yes, I am. Member Bragg? Member Klava?
Present.
And Member Pruitt?
Present.
We've got ourselves a quorum, everybody. First and foremost, let's start with agenda item number 2, public comments on items that are not on the agenda. If we welcome public comment, etc. If anyone would like to take an opportunity to address us, you'd have 3 minutes. So please raise your hand electronically if so.
And Chair Clemens, I will do this for every item that we ask for public comment since I am located in the physical location noticed on the agenda. I will do what I'm about to do, which is to state whether there is any members of the public located where I am. There are no members of the public located where I am, so I think we can check online for any public comment.
All right, this is the moderator. We are accepting public comment via WebEx. As previously stated, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. In order to participate in public comment, we're going to ask that people raise their hands. You can do that by tapping the hand button at the bottom of the screen. For dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand. And for our mobile device users, you have 3 different pages and only one of them has a hand button. So you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... in order to find your hand. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for agenda item 2, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. All right, everybody. I'm sure you'll be weighing in as we move forward. Our next exciting item on the agenda is discussion and possible approval of the minutes from the April 5th, 2024 Consumer Protection, Public Relations, and Outreach meeting. we've got the minutes before us. I personally was not there, but I did not hear from any of my colleagues who were there that they had any additions or corrections. Members who are present today, do you have anything you'd like to add in? All right, let's move to approve them. Would one of my colleagues please make a motion and somebody else make a second?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Member Pruitt, Member Bragg, thank you very much. Any public comment from anybody in your room, Greg?
No, there are still no members of the public located where I am at.
Anybody on the phone?
All right, we are open for public comment on agenda item 3. Now is the time to raise those hands by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We have no dial-in users and we have no mobile device users. So we're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, you wish to continue with the agenda?
If I said no, that would probably be a problem. So I think we should keep going with the agenda, despite the public's failure to weigh in on the very exciting issue of minutes. I am now going to call for a roll call vote. Member Bragg,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Member Pruitt,
Aye.
and I will join in with an aye to make it unanimous. And now let's go to the meat of our meeting and move to agenda item number 4. So members, our excellent staff have prepared a memo related to this item, which covers the board's adopted and codified goals for outreach as specified in our strategic plan. And there are 7 specific pillars of outreach that our board has adopted. And staff has gone into detail on each one and provided examples of the efforts we have completed to date. This is primarily designed to remind us of where things stand, as opposed to anything else. Greg, is there anything you'd like to add, given that your team did the work?
I think I just echo what you just said. I think it's what we're wanting to do in this item 4, is to make you all aware of what this board had previously adopted and had to say in terms of outreach. That strat plan was built, I think, in 2020 and then adopted for 21 through the end of this year. So while we're not dealing with the future in this item, we will later on in this this year talk about our future strat plan. But for our existing strat plan, we wanted to identify for you all what the board had said its goals were. I think, as you see in the material for this item, most of the goals or the pillars that we were instructed to work toward or to achieve are they're ongoing items, right? You know, identifying opportunities to expand outreach. That's an ongoing item. That's something we should continually be trying to do, right? Finding new groups, new ways of getting information out there. So what we've tried to do again is explain to you all what those goals, what those pillars were, and then provide some examples of the work that we've done in the past couple years to put those goals into practice, to try to meet those goals. I think one thing we could talk about in this item is whether you all have other ideas about how we might be able to achieve some of these pillars and some of these goals.
Thank you very much, Greg. I would like to open this up to, well, actually, yeah, I'd like to open this up to my colleagues to discuss any pieces of this. And I've got a few things I'd like to say, but I can wait until others have gone first. If my colleagues have any comments.
So it's Member Pruitt. I just have a kind of a comment or question. I mean, I agree, and I like the direction and everything that's in it, and it looks good. I'm just curious with the kind of the attention that diversity, equity, and inclusion has recently garnered. Does that in any way, or maybe in the foreseeable future, change anything that is the direction or focus of this plan at all? Or does it need to be, perhaps, or does it affect it at all?
Are you referring to maybe things that are happening more at the
On the,
national level
right, the
and
federal
those types
level.
of- Yeah. Well, I think that's going to be later on this year, we will initiate the process at the board level to begin looking toward the future, right? With the next strat plan that should cover about a 4-year period. I think the board will have opportunity at that time to have those types of conversations about what and whether it should focus on like DEI or other items that it may feel is important to the board, or maybe that it wants to be cautious about given certain conversations that might be happening at a national or federal level. But for right now, this is part of our strat plan. We amended it last year and embedded DEIB within the strat plan, and amended a few of the individual pillars to incorporate work or activities that we wanted to try to accomplish in that area, DEIB. Obviously, it's hard not to pay attention to what's happening around us, and we should be paying attention to what's happening around us at the national and federal level. But again, I think it would be more appropriately, that's something the board can discuss as it's looking toward the future in the next strat plan as to whether it wants to focus on an area or not. But the last thing I'd say about it is I'm aware of what's happening, at the national level and some of those conversations and specific actions that are being taken in the DEI space. I haven't seen anything directed at state level boards or entities like that yet. But it's something we should be aware of, and I think the board can have that conversation at a board meeting when it's looking toward the future strat plan.
Okay, sounds good.
Member Kleppa, just to follow up on Member Pruitt's assertion, does the board in any way rely on federal monies for what it does?
No,
Okay,
all of our funding comes from licensees.
that should limit the impact of the national conversation on our actions, I expect then.
Yeah, and I think, we're following the actions that we took regarding the DEI aspect of our strat plan that was amended last year was pursuant to an executive order by the governor.
Mhm.
We're following our law, right? We're following our charge. If and when that changes, then I suspect we'll adjust in due time. But for now, that's what's in effect for us, and that's what we've done. And I think we said this when we were going through that process, but we should be proud as a board that we were, I believe, the first DCA board to have gone through that executive order mandated process. So I think we'll continue to do what we're supposed to do in that regard. But yeah, we do need to be aware of what is happening at the national level. But again, to answer your question, Member Kleppa, we don't take a penny from the federal government, and we actually don't take a penny from the general fund either. We're all special funded by licensee fees.
Okay, thank you for that. I did have another question or comment in another area, if I may.
Sure.
These pillars, from what I'm hearing, have been set already, and they remain in place through the end of this year, right? So we're not changing them or discussing changing them at this meeting. Am I correct in that understanding?
That is correct. These are the established pillars for the current strat plan that's in effect through the remainder of this year.
Okay, so the focus of our discussion today then is how to better apply them? Is that the idea?
Well, I think that's certainly something that as a staff, if you or the committee collectively have ideas about whether we should be doing certain things, we would want to know that. But I think also just before that is wanting to make sure that you all are aware of what these pillars are, right? I know we talked about some of them last year when we went through the amended strat plan process, but these pillars here in front of us are specific to outreach. And so wanted to really make sure that you all, who of course didn't participate in the development of this strat plan 4 or 5 years ago, were aware of what your predecessors had charged us with doing. So is, I suppose, twofold, Member Kleppa. One, just wanting to establish that baseline knowledge for the committee to understand what we said that we were going to be doing, and then give some examples of what we have been doing. But yeah, I would certainly love to hear from you or the committee collectively about other ideas or other things that we could be doing regarding this item.
And I think, Robert, that items 5, 6, and 7 are specifically to dig into those in 3 different silos of how we communicate with people. And item 4, which we're on right now, is primarily to remind us what our overall mandate has been as decided by us, or some versions of us in the past.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right, Chair.
Okay, and I am seeing that we have 3 items coming up on certain modes of communication: social media, listserv, and newsletter. So regarding other possible ways of communicating, is that going to be covered elsewhere? Like in-person meetings at schools or things of that nature? Is that covered?
I think we could talk about those things now within this item. The items 5, 6, and 7 are more specific to social media, newsletter, and listserv. But the other activities that you just mentioned, like presentations to schools, visits, tour, things like that, those are all part of outreach. I think those activities all fall within at least one of these specific pillars, if not several of these pillars. Like, for example, 5.1, expanding outreach to diverse communities. That, there's activities within visits and tours and presentations that would fall within 5.1. So we don't have a specific agenda item to talk just about physical visits or things like that, but I think it's appropriate to talk about those activities within this item right here.
Okay, and in that regard, my first question is, has the board ever come up with a marketing plan where you actually fit this all together, all the different communication options in one cohesive whole, so you can figure out where to put your energy and your time and your money? Has that ever been developed?
No, I don't think I would say that we have developed a formal marketing plan. No.
Okay, is that something that the board might want to consider? Maybe to go to a school and have one developed through their program, or either a volunteer or a low-cost professional to help us better understand the best ways to meet the population we're trying to meet in the most cost-effective manner?
You asked us a few questions that I think within that item there. One has to do with maybe a contractor cost. I would say that we would have to explore that. I'd have to work with several entities within DCA regarding that. Specifically a contract or hiring some sort of consultant or something like that. I think there might be some challenges there. I think that's something this committee itself could develop. And I would actually ask if that's what this committee wants to do, that it be part of that process. We don't have anybody on staff with that expertise. And so it would need to be something that we would work on together. We could certainly reach out to other boards and see how they've attacked this question about a marketing plan and how they've navigated those waters, whether it's been a contract or some other process. But I think those are a few ways that we could go forward with that idea. I think we would need to do a little bit of research and exploration.
And that's exactly why I raised the point, because it's not my field either. And I'm not claiming to be an expert, but there are many experts in the world who spend their lives looking at outreach to particular populations in particular ways regarding particular ideas. And it would be great to bring in some of that expertise. One thought I had, and it's one I've had clients express to me, is talking to a marketing class at a college and asking them if they wanted to take us on as it were a case study. Since it is public service, they get credit, we get the benefit of their creativity. That's one low cost option that I don't know if it's legally permissible. I would leave that to council to speak on, but it would be a way for us to gain some of that expertise without expending too much of our funds. What would the thought process be there?
Well, again, I think as you just said it, would have to check with legal and others in the department, would want to know if there's examples of that being done, would want to know the guardrails, would want to know all of those sorts of questions. I think that's where we would have to start on that idea. So,
if I may jump in for a moment,
of course.
This is my expertise. This is something I do professionally. I'm a communications and outreach professional, and I've got a couple broad thoughts about this, which I wanted to sum up as we started item 5, but we can also do them here. I believe that we should walk before we run. I believe that the potential audience for our communications is very targeted and specific, which makes a broad marketing plan of less utility and targeted outreach effort to the people who would want to hear what we have to say, much more on point. But in working with Greg Pruden to put together an agenda for today, I wanted to discuss what our efforts were and whether they were meeting our expectations, whether they were a good use of staff time, and how we could improve them. I do believe that an official marketing plan, as you suggest, would be a good idea, but I don't know that it rises to the level of hiring someone yet, because I think we would want to get our own house in order and have the work that we're doing produce some results to show that there is actually an audience out there for the communications we are attempting to put forward. So if it's okay with you, Member Klepp, I'd like to move forward, of course, after we get public comment and conclude this item, but I'd like to move forward and look at the 3 items that are coming up before us in their silos and talk about how they interact as a cohesive whole. And then after we've discussed them, perhaps look on a more broad level of putting them all together with perhaps other ingredients and making a very nice stew that will help people receive our information in a more proactive and forthright and interactive way.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
One benefit of doing that, Chair and Member Kleppa, would be, again, this is our current strat plan ending this year, right? And so some of, I think, what you're both talking about would be informative to help guide us as we move forward over the next 4 years with a new strat plan related to outreach. So that all sounds like a good idea to me. And we can certainly come back to this item, right? As you just said, remember Chair Clemens, we can talk about 5, 6, and 7 and those specific items. And then we can come back to 4 with today and revisit this conversation once we've got the other elements and pieces sort of bolted on, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Member Bragg, anything you want to throw in?
Now wait until we get to newsletters.
Okay, just before we ask for public comment, let me address a question that was brought up by Member Pruitt. I am proud to be in California. I'm proud to be a Californian. I'm proud of our state's rich history of watching out for everybody, which has not always been a perfect one, far from it. But if folks at the national level would like to engage us in a debate about what is in fact wrong with diversity, in their opinion, or equity, or inclusion, or belonging, I would welcome that debate, because it's very clear to me where people wind up at the end of that conversation. And it's something that I would eagerly hope that we would defend and support and continue to uphold as we move forward with our little corner of the universe. I'd imagine our members of the Board of Optometry are one of the nation's most diverse. And the people we serve in this majority minority state are also one of the most diverse populations in the country. So our DEIB efforts, which I have been admonished by smarter people than I to not use the acronym whenever possible and instead talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, because it does reinforce the fact that those are very real things that a lot of people rely upon to move forward in this crazy world of ours, are worthwhile and worth defending. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. So if there is no other discussion from members, I would like to open this up from public comment. And Mr. Prudent, do you have any guests with you yet?
There are no members of the public located in the physical location where I am.
All right. How about on the interwebs?
All right, we are open for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We don't have any dial-in users. We'll take people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Thank you so much, David. All right, we'll move on to item 5, which is discussion, review, and possible action on the board's social media accounts, a topic that would not have been possible 30 years ago. Member staff has prepared a memo regarding the board's use of social media and has included stats and analysis for the 3 primary platforms the board uses, which are LinkedIn, X, and Facebook. And staff has also identified 3 opportunities which may help increase the board's social media reach. Before we go into those, and I would love for Greg to lead much of this conversation, let me back up to a higher level for a moment. I spent a dozen years in government, look back on them fondly, some of my favorite working experiences. I understand at a very base level what some of the restrictions and limitations of working in government are. Your job is to be as transparent as possible, which sometimes ruins speed, sometimes hurts effectiveness, but maintains the trust of the public, which is key when you are operating in a governmental entity. However, I have been concerned by the fact that we are in a world that values speed and outreach and glitz and excitement. And I don't think anyone would argue that the response to our social media offerings that we put forward is minimal. And I think that's a polite way of putting it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that based on what we are trying to accomplish, which is to be transparent. But I also feel that if we're going to put the time in to reach out to our members, the people we license, the people who use the services of the people we license, and the general public, we should do our best to try to get them to connect with our information. Certainly those who have some interest in it, which is not everybody. Generally, an agency like ours is of interest to the public only when something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. And we want to avoid that. But there's a lot of important information for the glasses and contact lenses buying public, for our optometrists and opticians and dispensers and so on, and the folks who work with them. And I believe that in an algorithm-led world, there are some very critical things we can do simply by doing what everybody says at the end of every single YouTube video done by an influencer, which is like, share, subscribe. As members, as leaders of this organization, I think it's incumbent upon us to try to assist with that in a proactive way. I would hope, and let me be clear, I would like staff in the CSBO and throughout DCA to assist with this effort as well, but it's certainly not something we can mandate. But many of the people, hopefully most, perhaps even all of the people who work at the California State Board of Optometry understand that they're working in a mission-driven organization, which is to protect the public and to make sure that we have excellent professionals working in our industry. And I would hope that they would contribute their time as well to like and share the postings that we make. And I think that it would be wonderful if the staff could make sure that all of the people who have expressed an interest in supporting the outreach of our various communications are notified when they pop up, so we can like them, we can repost them, we can share, we can subscribe, which tweaks the algorithms to say, oh, hey, maybe people are interested in this. Maybe I should send this thing that was sent out by the California State Board of Optometry to more people so that they might find it of interest as well. There's a chance that this will not be wildly successful. I do not think that we will achieve Chapel Roan level engagement with the general public, because we are not pumping out extraordinarily catchy pop songs. But I do think that with a focused effort that includes both board and staff, and perhaps those whom we license who are interested in what we do, perhaps those in classrooms that Member Kleppa is going to visit and talk about our mission with, and so on. If we had a concerted effort to actually try to tweak the algorithms, we could get our message out further. And importantly, I've had this conversation, so I know the answer, but I think it's helpful to the rest of you. Greg, can you confirm that we have no obligation, legal obligation, to engage in any social media work whatsoever? What we are doing is to be as transparent and welcoming to the public and those whom we license as possible. Is that a correct assessment of where things stand?
Correct. There's no legal mandate that we have a social media presence. There's no legal mandate of any of that.
So I'd like it's my day job is being an outreach professional. I am an advocate and communication specialist, even though I say too much. I'd like to stop that. I'd like the work that our staff is doing to actually have some resonance. And if we do our best to try to engage with folks out there and we're still achieving very little interaction, given the state budget deficits, given the cutbacks in staff across state government and in our agency, et cetera, I'd like to make sure that what staff are doing are producing results. And if we find that we're not producing results by doing this, I'd like us at some point, not today, down the road, to consider whether it's a worthwhile effort to continue doing. The newsletter we need to keep doing. It is informative, it is helpful. But our postings on social media, if we are continuing to get very little interaction, I'd like us to revisit that, or at least to look at how many hours are being put into the work that's being done, to see if there's a cost benefit analysis that makes sense to this board and to the leadership of the organization. So that's my spiel. I am applying that to the next two items as well as this one. And I'd love for us to go into as much detail as we feel is appropriate to talk about how we could improve what is before us. So the opportunities that are before us, I would like to toss back to Greg again. He is the one who, working with staff, has developed them. So Greg, if you'd like me to run through them, I'm happy to, but they're your baby, so I'd appreciate it if you take that on.
Sure. So in the memo that we produced for this item, again, this is item 5, social media utilization in our accounts. There's a couple of opportunities that we came up with that we think could at least assist in starting to move the needle. One, Chair just sort of hit on, which is either staff or board members following our accounts and engaging with those accounts. Based off my review of the 3 main accounts that we have, most of our board members do not follow any one of those 3 main accounts: LinkedIn, Facebook, or X. I also don't know if every board member maintains a social media presence. I didn't do that level of research, but what I can tell is that at least as of the time this memo was produced a week or so ago, we had one board member following our LinkedIn account and only one board member following our Facebook account, with no board members following our X account. That's, when we're fully staffed up at the board member level, we have 11 members. Right now we have 9. So there's a lot of opportunity right there, if board members have social media accounts, for them to follow, engage, like the content. That, I think, would help improve our reach. Several of our board members, as you all know well, are practitioners, are licensees. And so those licensee board members, presumably within their social media networks, have a lot of other licensees that they follow or are quote unquote friends with. That would help improve getting our messages out to our stakeholders. But even for our public members, you all are still professionals, and you have a professional responsibility as a member of this board in terms of consumer protection and all of the things that we care about. And you have your professional network too. And so maybe that professional network has less licensee members in it, since you're a public member and not a licensee member. But nevertheless, you engaging with that content would help spread that message to the public and to our stakeholders. So I think that's a sort of easy opportunity, again, assuming that our board members maintain at least one of these social media accounts. There's a lot of opportunity for our members to follow us and engage with the content. I think at the staff level, it would be a little bit more difficult, and that's why I didn't mention staff in this opportunity, because it's not a mandated activity and it's not part of their job duties. And I also think that, just from a privacy perspective, I think a lot of staff want to have some separation between their personal social media accounts and their professional work. But I can, notwithstanding that doesn't mean that we can't offer it or encourage it. But again, I don't think it could be something that's mandated or forced. That's a little bit different, I think, that again, on the board member side, we could certainly update our board member handbook and say it's our policy, if you will, that we want our board members to follow social media accounts. Although, again, I suspect that some board members may want to have some separation between their social media accounts and their professional responsibilities. But again, in terms of where's an easy opportunity where we can have some more engagement to, as Chair Clemens says, start to alter some of the algorithms and try to tweak them in our favor. If we only have one board member following our LinkedIn and only one board member following our Facebook, that's, I think, a lot of opportunity there. So that's certainly one idea. I'll just share as sort of an example there. As you all know, just 8 days ago, we took a tour of the Sac City Optical Training Program. We took a picture, we posted that on our accounts, and at least one board member and several other people have engaged with that content. It's one of our most engaged posts. And so I think that's a good example of where board member engagement can be helpful. So that's one idea. I don't know, Chair, if you want me to move on to the other ideas, or if I should maybe pause there and we could have a discussion about that idea.
I think you should run through your 3 opportunities identified and then open it up to board discussion.
Okay. So opportunity number 2 would be right now on our renewal notices that are sent out to every licensee. Our renewal notices are sent out 97 days in advance of the expiration of the license. So all of our licenses expire at the end of the month. So 97 days in advance of that expiration, the renewal is mailed to the address of record of the licensee, and the renewal application becomes available on our online licensing platform, Breeze. I think, as this committee knows, we don't yet have the ability to require our applicants and licensees to use email. This is a new issue for our board in the sunset report, and hopefully that authority will be granted to us soon. But absent that authority, is there an opportunity within the renewal notice where we can get this information out to our licensees about our social media accounts? And I think there is. I think there's an opportunity to explore utilizing a QR code that could be placed on the renewal notice. The way a QR code works, if you're not familiar with it, is you take out your smartphone with the camera and you hover it over that QR code and it pops up a link. You go to that link, and at that link you could follow, engage with our social media content. So that's something that can be explored. I've put a couple feelers out in the department to see about this idea, and I understand that there is at least one other program, one other board that has also or is also exploring the same idea. So that's something that could be considered. Again, a QR code on the renewal notice that gets mailed out. That would be a way that the licensee could otherwise know about our social media accounts. Because I think at the heart of it, that's really the key question: is how do we get the information in front of the person? And that's always a challenge. And so the renewal notice is something that has to come to them, and it comes to their address of record, which is the specific place that the licensee has told us to send mail to. So again, QR code would be item or idea number 2. Those are 2 specific ideas. Item 1 being the board members following our accounts and engaging, and then item 2 being the QR code. Item 3 is a less specific idea, but it's to sort of double down, if you will. It's already part of one of our outreach pillars, to essentially double down with our stakeholders and other associations to see if there's a way that we can partner with them on some sort of campaign or some sort of collaboration, working together where our social media information can be presented to their members. Whether it's the Optometric Association of California, or whether it's the California State Society for Opticians, or other organizations or groups that may have either licensees or members, other community organizations, things like that, where they may have a captive audience. That might be another opportunity that we can explore. Now, we're always talking with these groups, staff, myself. I talk with these associations frequent and often, but I think the idea here would be a little bit more specific to see if we can work together on, is there a communication that goes out on a standard basis from the associations to their members, maybe a newsletter or something like that? Is there a way where we could get some of our information into that newsletter? Would be perhaps one idea. So these were three ideas or 3 opportunities that we thought of from the staff perspective that may assist the board in terms of increasing its social media numbers. I think when you look at the memo, and that's the point, I think, of this item in this memo, is that there's a lot of opportunity that's on the table. We have about 17,000 licensees, current and active. And as you see from the statistics, we don't come anywhere close in terms of a penetration rate within that 17,000 number in terms of our followers across any of our social media accounts. And so that's really that's the problem. And then how do we increase that? So these were 3 ideas that we had. But maybe with that, let's see what the rest of the committee thinks. And if there's other ideas or comments, we can certainly discuss them at this time.
And just to level set before other folks jump in, EO Pruden said that our visit to Sacramento City College optical program was one of our most interacted with posts. Just so nobody gets the wrong idea, Those numbers are very small. On X, I'm seeing that there have been 14 views of that.
Yep.
On Facebook, we've got 2 comments, one of which was from me, and 7 likes. And on LinkedIn, 2 thumbs ups, and 1 comment from somebody who was not me. So if there are an enormous number of our posts that just go into the wild and disappear. And that's the sort of thing that I'd like us to decide whether or not it's worthwhile to continue doing. And I think we should, after conversation, discuss ways that staff can move forward and the board can engage, and we can engage with the California Optometric Association and others to say, hey, could we please focus on this a little bit and see if we can get more traction? And if not, let's revisit the entire thing. With that, I would turn it over to my colleagues on the committee.
Okay, well, I have a few comments, so I'll defer to the doctors for now. Any comments from the doctor's side first?
It's Member Bragg. Just a couple of comments as far as following and everything. I think it is a good idea for the QR on the renewal, because as a licensee, I wouldn't think that the board has any kind of social media presence or anything. But then on the flip side, as a consumer affairs agency, our main goal is to protect the consumer. So you think a lot of the outreach would be directed towards consumer patient things, and that may be something that licensees aren't necessarily interested in. So I think it's difficult. We would almost have to have basically like 2 separate things if we're wanting to get information to licensees, any kind of regulation type things. The public's probably not going to be too interested in that. And then the other way, getting consumer information, the licensees may not be all that interested. So I think that seems to be a bit of a challenge, but that doesn't mean that we can't overcome that challenge. But I think that's where some of the disconnect or maybe lack of interest maybe. So,
Member Bragg, I think you hit on an important point, which is the direction of the communication might look different depending on who the intended audience is, right? If it's a licensee intended item versus if it's more of a public protection consumer notice, right? Maybe, Member Kleppa's been so great about sharing with me every time there's an eye drop recall, right? So then there's sometimes also, if we have drawn a Venn diagram here, then there's some examples that are both. I mean, at the end of the day, you're a doctor, but you're also a patient and a consumer too. And so sometimes I think you're right, figuring out how to target those messages can be difficult. There are other times and examples, like for example, last fall when the federal government updated its regulations regarding the eyeglass rule, and we put together some guidance to put out. That's guidance that's both applicable to the consumer, but also to the practitioner. So I think you're right. I just want to acknowledge that there is a challenge. I think sometimes that who our audience is can sometimes be 2 different populations, but then in some cases they overlap. And so then figuring out how to attack those communications and get that information out, I think you're right, can sometimes be a little bit more challenging.
Okay, Member Pruitt, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, yeah, I get what Member Bragg is saying and what Greg was saying, in that the target audiences can be difficult to navigate and direct messages to. And then at the same time, I do see how getting information to the consumer can be effective by the licensee being connected because a lot of patients will connect to the board through their provider. And so I mean, it is an indirect link, and I can see where that is effective. But having said that, guilty as charged, I do not have social media. I made a very clear decision back in 2008 to leave Facebook, and even since have like requested Facebook to permanently remove my information. And I literally this week have tried to get LinkedIn to remove my information because somehow it has my information for a LinkedIn page that I never signed up for. And so I don't have social media because I don't like the negative aspect of it. And so I, guilty as charged, am not
Nope.
an avenue for information to everyone I touch. And so I'm a bit of a kind of quandary, or I get a contradiction rather. I see the benefit, but I'm also part of the problem.
I reject your self-determination as a problem. You've taken a principled stand, and that's wonderful. None of us wants one of our members who's intentionally avoiding social media to dive back in to promote things with their very small circle of friends who also don't want to be on social media. So you're not guilty of anything, Joe.
So, thank you. Right.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, I'm going to follow up with Member Pruitt's statement. I'm not on social media except one of these platforms. So I couldn't follow if I wanted to because I'm not on them. And to be honest, I don't know quite how they work. So I'm happily ignorant in many ways in this regard. So, but I do agree with Member Clement's comment about the please join on all of our communications that go out to professional licensees. I don't think there's any problem with us putting an encouragement on those communications saying, this is how you join us. This is how you're learning more. Please join us here. So I would encourage that as well.
Mhm.
I would also agree with the executive director's statement about potentially requiring licensees to provide the board with an email. I think it's an easy way to communicate that way. And if we have a common communication ability, then it's much easier for information to go out, much easier for us to get feedback, especially if we do a survey of our licensees to see what's working, what isn't with the board. So I would encourage that effort go forward. Use of the QR code, also a good idea. It also encourages communication, creates this back and forth dialogue, or at least the ability to have it. And obviously working with other associations who have a common goal is a good idea as well. As long as we have our focus and they understand that our common communication has to meet that goal, I have no objection to it because it puts the same good information out there using multiple channels. But I always come back to this comprehensive marketing plan. I don't know if this is the right place to go into it even further, but at some point, there has to be an evaluation of which platforms we're on, which are the most effective. When I teach students and I mention Facebook, they roll their eyes at me because they say it's not something we use. They use Snapchat. They use a lot of other platforms that I'm not the person to say which are better and which are worse, but a comprehensive marketing plan might discuss that. It might discuss, as Member Bragg and Member Pruitt mentioned, how do we focus our outreach on our different populations? The general public who consume the service, the licensees who provide it. There might need to be a slightly different focus for each population. Comprehensive marketing plans help with that. And so I'm just saying, back to that original idea, we do need to consider that, even though we might be changing our goals slightly, maybe farther into the year, if we come up with an idea of having a comprehensive marketing plan done, we can start it using our current goals and modify it as necessary, whether that's with a paid individual, a volunteer individual, or a school. Whatever source we choose to gain that plan, I think it would be very important to have it because it'll help focus our energies. Which platforms, which in-person events, how much on the newsletter, how much on something else. they can help kind of weigh out where that effort goes. And that's what I would encourage it at some point. That's it.
Any other comments from members? Let's open it up to public comment. Greg, you've been joined by anyone?
No, there are no members of the public located in the physical location where I am.
How about on the line?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, I think that this item is, and perhaps the following two are worthy of being continued into our next meeting of this committee. I would like to create a motion, Greg, for you and staff to move forward with the QR code communications portion of this, which seems rather simple. Tell me if I've got that wrong, but
I don't know if I need a motion. I mean, I was already starting to have conversations and move in that regard before this meeting.
Great.
At risk of, I suppose, the motion, if the committee did not want me to do that, that would be maybe an appropriate motion. But I don't know, council, if you think differently. I don't need the, I mean.
Good. If you don't need us to
Leader of
direct
the
you
board.
to do it, and you're going to do it, go do it. That's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to say is if the committee or the board wants to direct that, you guys certainly can. I don't want to stifle your power in any regard there, but we are already kind of moving forward with that idea. We've already had started to have some initial conversations about whether it was possible. Have you heard of other programs doing that? You know, those sorts of things. I will say that as we've talked about in other contexts, this would be a BMO, a breeze maintenance order. And so it would be subject to the process that we have to, that exists to make changes on our breeze system. So it would be something that could happen next month or probably even the month after, but we can get the ball rolling on it and then fit it into a later breeze release schedule at some point this year.
That's fine with me. Any of my colleagues suggest a different action?
I can certainly give a commitment to the committee that we can bring this back as like an update, right? You guys will want to hear an update as to, you know, what we've done here. So that's certainly a commitment we can make as we'll at our, you know, next meeting of this group or even at the full board level, provide that update as to the QR code and how we've changed the renewal notice.
Well, in that regard, could we also get some determination as to whether a comprehensive marketing plan is something that we could pursue?
Yeah, same thing. I can make a commitment to that. We will explore those conversations. I think there's lots of different general, you know, different directions that could take. Some of we've talked about, whether it's a contract with a consultant or exploring subject matter expert, a school or something like that. Those are going to require some conversations with others in the department. I can certainly start to have them.
Yeah, I would like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Greg, your third item was discussing with other stakeholders and associations and encouraging them to join with us or engage in some level of reciprocity. I would be happy to volunteer my time to join you on those phone calls or Zooms or WebExes. If you could put together a list of folks we should reach out to, let's get on the phone. I don't think those are Open Meeting Act requests, since it's just you and me on the phone, and we can go on with the charm offensive and try to get some new followers.
Yeah, I think it's, I agree with you. I think it's, again, we talk with these groups all the time. And when I give presentations now, it is actually one of the last things that I say. Join our listserv, follow our social media accounts. I say it at every presentation that I give. Clearly, as you can see from the stats, it doesn't matter. It hasn't moved the needle. And so I think when we're talking about this item going forward, it's how can we, it's not working, me just asking, right? And so the conversations going forward are how can we actually work together, right? COA, I'm just, picking on them, if you will. Do they send a newsletter out monthly to members? I suspect they probably do as a membership-driven organization. Is there a way we can get a blurb in there? Something like that, right? That would be more than what we're doing right now. So yeah, to your point, I think that's where those conversations should head.
Yep. And I think if you and I are on the phone with the head of the COA or someone else at a different organization, and we say, we're actually trying to push this and we're actually trying to get more information out to the general public and your members and our members, and we'd like your active help in it, that's a different tone and tenor than, hey, here's a way to up. So I'd like us to push. And I think you and I are actually vaguely convincing to some people. All right.
Might I also suggest, by the way, that when you do these calls or Zoom calls or what have you, you have that QR code on the screen?
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to, I mean, we have to develop that, but you're right. That'll be, some of my presentations are virtual, others are not. Even when I'm in person, I usually have a slideshow. But yeah, right now we just have our social media and stuff on those presentations. But yeah, when we have a QR code, it would be included in those materials.
Yeah, like for instance, I'm looking now on the screen at our slides. I can see the website address at the bottom. You could certainly add the QR code as well for anyone who tunes in. Gives them an easy way to join the social media campaign.
Yes, I agree with you. I think those are things that we should do. I think, though, to Chair Clemens' point, we got to be more direct in the ask. I include in my signature block the icons for 2 of our social media accounts. I need to get LinkedIn included. My guess would be, I mean, I probably send out thousands of emails every year. My guess would be not a single person has ever clicked that link in my signature block and then signed up. So it's got to be more than just, we have to do that. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't include the buttons and all of that, but I think there's a lot of examples where that really hasn't worked, and so we have to be more direct. We have to try to establish some sort of campaign with these associations or other groups, so that they're helping boost that information or get that social media information out to their members too. I mean, I can go to COA's Facebook and I can see they've got thousands more followers than what we have. So, there's room, I think, for us to partner together and help each other out.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So I'll certainly, that's a commitment. We'll bring back information and updates on these items at either a future committee meeting or a future board meeting.
I don't believe I've heard any intent by members to make motions here, but I'll open it up in case someone has an idea.
Well, I think the executive director indicated he didn't need our authority. If it would be useful to gain our endorsement of the actions you've described, I'd be willing to make a motion. What do you?
I don't think, I mean, it's not necessary one way or the other. Exploring changes to renewal notices are things that we always do. We're working on changes to the renewal notice right now in a different regard. So again, this is just another idea that we've already started to explore. It's already part of my job to be talking with the stakeholders and working together. And so I think I have the general authority in these areas to move forward. Certainly, you guys, if I was pushing back and not wanting to do those things, you'd want to make a motion and direct me to do it. But I'm hopeful that my commitment to this group publicly would suffice.
I agree with Greg. I have nothing to add.
All right. Remind me, I think we asked for we did ask for public comment on this issue. So correct. I believe we are ready to move on to item 6, going once, going twice. Item 6. All right, let's get to the public outreach piece that we all know and love, and several of us have been profiled in. Spectacle, discussion, review, and possible action on the board's newsletter. Staff has prepared a memo regarding the board's newsletter and included examples of how the newsletter is used to accomplish the 7 strategic plan goals. You've got the 3 most recent editions of the Spectacle, which always think of like Sherlock Holmes and, 1879 Spectacles. It's a good name.
Thank you.
I'd also like it to be a little more, creating a spectacle of its own. But again, we are in a very niche world, and not everybody's going to be super interested in what's going on in our latest magazine. But Greg, would you please take us through Spectacle? And I'm just wondering whether Brennan, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, given that the Spectacle goes out through the listserv, I believe that's right. Yes, it's right. Greg told me right here on this page, whether we can discuss these next 2 items as a whole and combine them, or if we need to keep them separate since they're agendized separately.
That was to you, Brendan.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm okay discussing them together. Unless Greg thinks it's better to keep them separate for discussion purposes, but legally, I don't have a problem with it.
No, I don't think, no is my answer. I think naturally all 3 of these items, social media, listserv, and the newsletter, they're all related, and they're all related in many ways. The newsletter goes out by listserv, which is one method that it goes out by. It's not the only method. But it is the primary method that the listserv is distributed by. And as you'll see by the listserv item, it's probably the method that has the most reach. Although I think there's a lot of, and we can talk about that too, if we're going to combine them, I think there's a lot of opportunities on the listserv side that we can explore and take advantage of. So I'm fine with combining them.
Okay. So since the Spectacle is our primary product and the listserv is our primary method of outreach, I'd like to call items 6 and 7 together just to memorialize that for the people who are listening in. Greg, would you present to us what you've pulled together on these 2 issues, separating, combining as you see best fit?
Sure. I'm just going to start with just some of the newsletter and a little bit of context. When I started in November of 2022, we had been doing a newsletter. We were calling it I think it was called the Board's Enforcement Bulletin at that time. And it was mostly, as I just said, enforcement related. It wasn't a whole lot of anything else contained in it. And it didn't have a routine schedule that it was released on. It was kind of, we do one, maybe we'll, miss several, couple quarters would go by, we'll do another one. So there wasn't a lot of routine to the frequency of the distribution. I appreciate the comment about the Spectacle. The funny story about that is here at our board office, actually at our main table where we conduct staff meetings, we were talking about the newsletter. It was one of my first weeks here at the board, and I didn't like the name Enforcement Bulletin, and kind of challenged the team. Well, what could we come up with? And we're kind of like looking around our office suite, and there's actually a piece of artwork hanging on our wall that is in the shape of glasses, and then it's called The Spectacle. And it's like, well, why don't we just call it The Spectacle? So that's where the name came from. But doing that, we tried to rebrand it to no longer just be about enforcement, and we tried to make it more holistic to the entire board. And I think we have accomplished that over the last 2.5 years. We have also been publishing the Spectacle on a routine schedule, which I think is also helpful. To make it more regulated in that way, more periodic, if you will. So that's just a little bit of context about sort of where I started from with this item, with the Spectacle, and what we've tried to do over the last 2.5 years. As I said, that we try to include information that touches on all aspects of what we do at the board. It's very important to me, for example, that there always be something dealing with both optometry and opticianry in every edition, because those are our two main programs, optometry and opticianry. So we've tried to do that, I think, and we've been successful in every edition of including information regarding both sides. I think as we were just talking at the item just immediately prior to this one, the way we, who our audience is that we're trying to reach, we think both about the stakeholders, the licensees, but we also think about members of the public. And so we try to include information that is useful to them. Just give you one example. In our outreach and collaboration with the institutions, with the schools, we have 3 California schools of optometry in our state. We had been told that one of the schools was seeing an increase of patients coming to their clinic who did not know that health plans are required to provide vision coverage for kids. And so the school reached out to us and said, hey, we're seeing an increase of this. Is there anything you think you could help us distribute in the newsletter? Yeah. And so we did. We actually did that in the last winter edition. We published information on the Infant C program and included information about that requirement that all health plans provide vision coverage for children. So again, that's just an example of ways that we've tried to speak to different audiences on the aspect of diversity and reaching out to different communities. We've done a lot of that work as well. I think in this newsletter, we've included guest articles from outside groups like Latinos and Optometry regarding culturally competent care. So we've tried to use the newsletter in all of these ways to speak to our stakeholders, our licensees, and the consumers and patients of California. It's important to mention that there is no law, at least no law within our Practice Act, that requires we do any of this. There is no law that requires us to publish a newsletter. However, I think it's very important that we do so. You might be wondering whether I have a sense or an idea about what types of information or content that we include in the newsletter might have more eyeballs that get put on it versus others. I will share with you, while we haven't surveyed or done anything formal or statistical in that regard, anecdotally, I hear often that the enforcement side, we publish at the end of the newsletter recent discipline and citation activity. I've heard a lot of feedback about that information that gets published. But I think a couple discussion topics for this group and for this meeting today would be, are there ideas or thoughts about how we can be more effective in using the spectacle? Might that include certain types of content that we include or do not include? And then are there ways that we can try to encourage more content, especially from featured guests? I'm certainly not a communications or PR professional, but I think that sometimes guest articles, at least that's my thought and feeling, guest articles can help bring new eyeballs to your publications and can often serve as more engaging content. I think another thing that we've tried to do, and I certainly have solicited it several times, is encourage board members to write articles. There's at least one member on this meeting who has taken advantage of that opportunity and did produce a really, really thoughtful and helpful article in one of our newsletter editions. So that's always a standing opportunity and invitation for board members to have a guest article or have a standing column, if you will, in the newsletter. So I think those are a couple different discussion topics that we can explore today. but certainly want to hear from you all about your thoughts about how the newsletter is used and whether we can do things differently and perhaps better.
Member Bragg, I have a couple of comments because so I do like that the newsletter does have the consumer part. Usually it seems like there's always an article consumer related, and then the licensee. I think I have a couple ideas maybe to increase licensee engagement. One, and I don't even know if it would be allowed, but first one is maybe like a board sponsored 1 hour CE. If we could do solicit like from one of the schools of optometry, if there was a professor that wanted to put something together and then the practice education committee approve it, and it would be listed in there for licensees, and then that could go something out on the listserv. Hey, our latest edition of the spectacle has 1 hour free CE. And then maybe, and then another idea is a little tiny section like, do you know your rules and regs? And just have a quick little 5 question pop quiz or something, multiple choice, and just to see, so the licensees can kind of, kind of like your driver's license test, how once you get your license, you forget about the rules of the road. Maybe
Right.
same for the practicing optometrist. So those are just 2 ideas I had.
Those are good ideas. I mean, the first idea would probably require legal change because our regulations are specific to the types of CE that is allowable or countable. I can certainly explore that with counsel offline because one unique angle that you did mention in your example is if like a professor at one of the schools wrote an article under our laws, CE that's authorized or approved by a school is automatically good under our law. So there may be the possibility that a certain professor already has something approved or authorized by their institution and then could include it in the newsletter. And maybe that would be a way of acquiring CE that would not require us to change our regulations. That's something that we can look into with counsel. But certainly the alternative or the other idea, which is to just write an article and then people reading it or accessing the content would be eligible for some amount of CE. That would definitely require a regulatory change. Right now, we only authorize, as a similarity to this idea, we only authorize CE credit for you, the practitioner, writing journal articles and things of that nature. And I think there may even be a peer review, like it has to be a peer reviewed journal, which of course our newsletter is not. So we would have to explore, I think, that idea with counsel a little bit further, but it's certainly a good idea. I will say too, just in that context, we do publicize the 4 hours of free CE that you can get by simply attending one of our board meetings. And I think we all know that there's not a lot of licensees that take advantage of attending our board meetings and thus are not acquiring 4 hours of free CE that's just there for the taking. So, there's that aspect of this too, but those are good ideas.
I was just gonna throw out, and I support both of the ideas of Member Bragg. I think they're good ideas. I know the state bar does give free CE for us, and we always jump on it. 4 hours is a big time commitment, 1 hour is doable. So a smaller chunk might be more useful. Also a thing I like to see, and by the way, I like the spectacle as written. I like its graphics, I like its content. So I think we're just kind of polishing rather than changing, at least in my opinion. And one polish might be more interviews of individuals either in the field or who are benefited from the field. People like to hear about other people. So we're a very large state. We have practitioners all over the state. Maybe it would be useful for us to solicit from our members, if you have someone you could identify, as someone who contributes a lot in their area, even a small area, Northern California, is what I'm thinking of, who might deal with a population that the rest of the state is not as familiar with. They might either contribute an article or be subject to an interview on their practice area and the population they deal with. I know Dr. Garcia deals with a particular population. So he might be a good person to kind of be lead batter, as it were, on that particular type of article. But and I'm just a consumer here, I don't write for this stuff, but I like to see articles on people in my field so I can learn from their experience. So especially if you have a picture of the individual and we have some discussion of their practice and how they overcome certain barriers or certain challenges, that's always useful to me. And I'd recommend more of that for the spectacle as well. And then, like I said, just throw out an open invitation, and I've seen magazines do that. I've seen magazines actually ask this question. We're looking for people who can talk about X subject. Please let us know who you can identify that we can talk to. And that's an easy way or an easier way to get people to interview or to get more input on a particular topic that may lead to a useful article. I don't see any reason why we simply can't ask that somewhere in the spectacle at the end. Our next issue is going to focus at least in part on X. If you have someone you can recommend we can talk to about X, we'd love to hear about them, that type of thing. And I think you mentioned it, guest articles from professionals in the field, or we can talk about students, how they got, or how professionals were students and got turned on to the field, what things about the field excited them. I think the spectacle talks, understandably so, talks a lot about professional issues. Maybe we should talk a little bit more about consumer-related issues on a consumer level. I'm not sure how that would be addressed, but at least it's a slightly different topic area to consider. That's all I have.
I really like those ideas, especially the first one. I think there's a lot of value to doing like a type of interview. You know, how long have you been an optometrist? Oh, so you work in rural. There's so many different angles you could do there. You could pediatric there's so many different angles that you could take with practitioners in that type of example. I really like that. The other idea that you had about it's like soliciting type of feedback. We can certainly do that. We kind of do something similar already right now. At the very end of our newsletter, we say, ask an analyst, submit your questions and look for the answer in the next edition of the spectacle. How many people do you think have sent in anything in 2.5 years? The answer is 0. Not a single person licensee has, and this has been in there for 2.5 years, has ever wrote in submitting a question looking for us to answer it in a future edition of the spectacle. So maybe we're not asking the question in the right way. Maybe there's a different way that we can wordsmith it. But I'm not seeing a lot of information or questions coming to us with that attempt that we're making there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that interview is we do that with new board members. When they right, you guys both went through that. When you get appointed, we do a little of that Q&A. But I think it's a really good idea to do that with licensees, and especially the 2 licensees on this meeting know not all licensees work in the same fields or in the same areas or have the same populations, so on and so forth. And so I think there is a lot of value in learning from others in that way. We can certainly explore that in future editions.
Just to add to that last point, or second to last point, I agree with that statement at the end of the spectacle. If you have any questions, please send them in. I understand there's not a lot of response. What I'm thinking is to do it more like the other magazine does, which says, this is our topic. Please give us people who can speak on this topic, or give us some suggestions on areas of the topic to discuss. Make it more active, make it more affirmative, because that focuses people and sometimes gets you the response that an open-ended question of, well, do you have any questions? No one has any at the moment, so they don't respond immediately. But if you say, I'm looking for people who can speak to practice in a rural area of a population of 1,000 or less, what are the challenges? Then you focus their mind, oh, okay, well, I know a guy or I know a woman who does X. in this area, and they might be a good choice. Sometimes I think it may jog a response that an open-ended question might not.
Sure.
I think this conversation does focus on the challenge that we face, which is the information we are putting out is of great interest to a few people, and it generally one directional rather than interactive. And we may get through some of what Greg is planning to do with his team and find out that there aren't more things we can do to increase interaction. I do think that the spectacle is not broken and does not need to be fixed. Obviously, I think there were some great comments on additions that could be made to it. But especially with the Sunset Review report and the new requirement that we're going to get everybody's email, we just add them to the list. And if they ask to be taken off of it, of course, we'll take them off of it. But we will increase our numbers substantially over the next year as people cycle through renewals and we obtain email addresses from them. Hooray. That'll be, Greg, you wanted to say something?
Well, I'm seeing a natural segue for a point I want to make, but I'll wait for you to finish.
No, I think we're all being challenged about how to fix this, and there are lots of little things we can do that might be of interest to a dozen people here or a dozen people there, but I'm not sure that moves the needle in a substantial fashion. And I would like to try to focus on this for board members, from staff, to see whether the needle can be moved. But I don't want us to decide that we're going to suddenly be able, with certainty, that we're going to be able to get everybody interested in what's going on in our social media posts, in the spectacle, signing up for our listserv, et cetera, because this is a specific population we're trying to reach with specific pieces of information that generally are consumed and then acted upon by individuals, and not starting the process of a communications loop back and forth. So go ahead, floor is yours, Greg.
Yeah, no, I mean, I probably just echo what you were just saying. I mean, at the heart of all of the challenge that we're talking about is how do you get the regulated community and the consuming public to care about what we're doing. And, you know, just to go back to the prior item on social media statistics, if you look at some of the data that we are including there, you know, this is a problem that hits every board and every bureau at DCA. It hits the department itself. I mean, the department itself impacts 3 million licensees. There's 4,000 people that follow it on Twitter. I mean, that's the entire DCA. So, you know, you can look at Bureau of Automotive Repair, the largest bureau. We have about the same number of Twitter followers that they have. Bureau of Automotive Repair is in people's consciousness every 2 years when they have to do smog check, right? Every person that owns a car deals with that bureau. Barbering and Cosmetology, largest board in the department, almost 600,000 licensees. They're doing a really good job on Facebook compared to us. But my point here is that getting professional licensees, especially healthcare licensees, to engage and pay attention to your social media or your newsletter or your listserv, I think is always a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. I think it's a good segue into listserv, because again, the newsletter is the main, listserv is the main way that the newsletter is distributed in terms of the reach that it's sent out to. Our listserv is about 8,000 folks, but it's important to understand what listserv is. Listserv is voluntary. It's voluntary. It's not mandated. And so you have to choose to sign up for that. Now we've tried to make that ability more prominent on our website. When you go to our homepage, it's right there. The join our mailing list button is right there. But as Chair Clemens said, one of the issues that we have is we don't have a lot of email addresses for our applicants and licensees. And the main reason why we don't is because you're not required to give it to us. And so many don't. We have, as has already been stated, we have that policy proposal in our sunset review report, and I'm very hopeful that the legislature will engage with that issue and grant us that authority. Why will it matter? Well, specifically in terms of outreach, we will then have everybody's email address, and we will be able to send them information like the newsletter. Last year, in the calendar year 2024, a grand total of 6 people were added to our listserv, but only 3 of those 6 did so voluntarily. The other 3 were manually added by me or staff because the person said, hey, can you add me to the listserv? So we went ahead and did it.
Mm.
3 people chose to sign up for our communications in the year 2024. Let's just take optometry licensees as one example. We licensed 235 new optometrists last year. We only added 3 total people to our listserv. So numbers suggest to me that the odds are not a single one of those new optometry licensees, 235 that we licensed, is part of our listserv. Therefore, none of those new licensees are receiving the communications that we send out via listserv. They're not seeing the newsletter, for example. They're not seeing the guidance on the federal eyeglass rule that we sent out via listserv. Now, all of this information is on our website too, and anybody, of course, can go there and find it. But the listserv is the best way that we communicate with our licensees. This has real world impacts. Just in the last 2 months, a big part of our state's been suffering with fires. And when the governor issued an executive order to defer renewal fees, all of the programs and trying to implement that were faced with, well, how do we get this information out to our licensees? Because we're all challenged with getting information out to them, right? All the issues that we're talking about. So this all has relevance, I think, to how we conduct our work, how we carry out our mission, and getting that email authority to require applicants and licensees who have one to provide us it. Remember, it would be confidential. It's not subject to public records disclosure. It would go, I think, a long way to helping us get the information out to our stakeholders, to our licensees. That doesn't solve the consumer side of our communications, but again, we're licensing hundreds of people every year, and an overwhelming majority of these people are not signing up for our listserv. They're therefore not staying current and up to date with the information that we're putting out there. Are there any opportunities that we can engage on to fix that in the interim while we don't have email authority in law? There might be. One of those ideas could be, as I said, we don't have email addresses for everybody because it's not required, but you can voluntarily give it to us. When you voluntarily give us your email, you're doing that through Breeze, right? Through an application or through a license type, through a renewal. We could explore taking those emails from Breeze and then uploading them into listserv. That might upset licensees who didn't voluntarily sign up for that listserv system. That could be a negative consequence of that action. And of course, again, we don't have legal authority to require email addresses. So that's certainly something that could happen, but that is something that we could explore. We could explore downloading them from Breeze, uploading them into listserv. Listserv has a unsubscribe option. So anybody receiving emails through listserv could elect to no longer receive them. But that might be a way to help increase our numbers. Frankly, I was shocked to find out that we only had 3 or 6, depending on how you want to look at it, new enrollees to the listserv system. That was a little disheartening and sad to realize, because it means that a lot of our, again, communications are just going out into the void and not being seen by any of our new licensees, right? So those are some additional challenges I think that we should consider. That's an opportunity that we might want to look into, at least in the interim, until we have that email authority in the law.
I would say that we run a small risk of ticking folks off. Sorry, Joseph, you're absolutely next. We run a small chance of ticking people off by adding them to a list, but they are our licensees. I think that everyone will see that it's reasonable for us to add them to our list. We should, of course, have an unsubscribe button prominently featured, especially for new folks. And as long as we do that, I doubt that anyone will complain about it in any substantial way. Joseph, sorry, I think you were ahead of me in queue.
I thought it was member Kleppa.
Well, he put his hand up and then took it down, I think.
I wanted to make sure all the comments were done before I jumped in. So Member Pruitt, it's all yours.
Oh, appreciate that. I was just going to say that I know it's an issue of target audience between a licensee or a consumer, but I was just going to mention it with the respects to the newsletter. I mean, it is. I really like the newsletter. The newsletter, I agree with the chair that it is great, and it is anything, or what Member Clipper said, it's not anything that needs to be fixed, or it's just really polishing. But I was just wondering if it's in regards to social media, if it's something that we can not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but piggyback on licensees who already have a social media presence or a huge social media following, and that if we start including QR codes and kind of beginning to learn or see which licensees already have that presence, highlighting them in the newsletter, and in addition to sending out the letter on the listserv, having them post it on their social media and to all their followers, and that way disseminating information. I know that kind of blurs the line between licensees and consumers, because I obviously huge social media presence, they're bound to have a lot of followers who are both consumers and licensees. And so I know the information might not be applicable to everyone on there or all their followers, but that way we get information out that is not necessarily us having to generate that or build that following.
I know that there are some Facebook groups like ODs on finance. There's other groups like that are active on various social media accounts. I do also, when we publish the newsletter, I do send it out to the deans at the California colleges. We do try to distribute it in different ways, but I think you're right. Trying to penetrate more into those opportunities would be helpful. The email requirement has another benefit, right? We've been talking about QR codes, and the QR code becomes more important, at least in my mind, right now, in the absence of an email requirement, because our renewal notices are mainly distributed and received physically, right, through the mail. If and when we get the email requirement, we can still use a QR code, because we will still be sending out the renewal notices, but we will be able to include hyperlinks in that renewal notice, because it'll be distributed via email, right? And a hyperlink taking you directly to the listserv, a hyperlink taking you directly to the social media accounts where you can follow, engage, so on and so forth. So that's another aspect of the email requirement that would be helpful, because again, you can get more of that information directly in front of the person, at least in terms of, click and then you're there, as opposed to, hey, please follow us on social media. The information is right there in front of you. So these are all really, really good ideas, and I think things that we should explore.
Okay, real fast, these are more questions rather than comments. Gregory, when we're talking about communicating with licensees, we do not currently have a database of communication then? So when they turn in their applications for licenses and the like, they're dealing with the website and they are not required as part of that application to provide us with an email. Is that right?
That's correct. The law does not require an applicant or a licensee to supply an email. They have to supply an address of record.
All right. So my question is, and I'm not a licensee, obviously, so I don't know. When you are applying for a license, do you fill out an application online?
Yes,
Okay. Is there a box on the application for an email address?
yes,
Okay. But they don't have to fill it in, and if they choose not to, they don't, right?
correct. Because the law does not require them to do so, and it does not authorize us to require them to include it.
All right. So
We
for
do-
those who don't provide an email address, how does the board communicate with them?
Address of record,
So they mail stuff. also.
correct.
Okay.
We encourage, as part of our outreach and presentations and instructions, for everybody to use email. It matters specifically more for the optometry applicants than it does for anybody else, and it matters for this reason. If you include an email address, you will receive your authorization to sit for the California Law and Regulations exam faster than if you did not include an email address, because you're only going to receive the authorization and the information for that exam via mail. So if you use email, you get the information you need to sit for the exam much quicker than if you do not. So this is part of our standard communications, our encouragement, in every presentation that we give. But again, we do not have legal authority to require an email to be provided.
So if I understand, when you gave that statistic of 6 out of 235 who gave the email and signed up in that way, that literally means that for the remainder, 229 or whatever it was, we don't have an email address at all in our system in any respect, right?
No, I wouldn't say that. So let me try to unpack it and be clear. The number 6 that I'm referring to is how many people voluntarily signed up for our listserv. That could be 6 members of the public who never applied for a license type of any type. Listserv is voluntary. It could be anybody who signed up for that. Breeze is our online licensing system where we receive all applications. There is no statutory requirement that any applicant or licensee include an email address when applying or renewing. So people do include it because it's optional and you can, but that is Breeze. That's different than Listserv, which is our mailing communication system.
So what percentage of the licensees who sign up on Breeze do we have emails for? Would it be a higher percentage?
Well, we would have to do that analysis, and I'm not sure how, I'm not sure we could just run a program and it would spit that out. I'd have to look into that, but I would guess, without having done that analysis, that we do not have email addresses on a majority of our licensees.
Okay, which is why the mandatory requirement would be so helpful, right?
Exactly. It would be helpful for many reasons, not just this reason that we're talking about right now, but it would also cut down on paper.
Sure. So but that would also speak on the flip side to Member Clemens' point that we could take those optional signups on Breeze and shift them over to Listserv if we wanted to, right?
I think that's an idea that we can explore. Yeah, I am aware of a program in DCA that does do that. That's why I mentioned some of the downside of that, which is I think that some licensees may object to it, just based off what I've heard from that other program. But I'm not aware of there being any prohibition that says we can't do that. They have supplied us an email address via their Breeze application. We're not soliciting them, I don't think, in any untoward way. But yeah, to your question, we haven't done an analysis of how many of our licensees have supplied one or not, but because they're not required to, my guess would be a majority have not.
Okay, well, I would, if it wasn't clear, I would support Member Clemens' idea of shifting that information from one database to the other and including it in both, since it is voluntarily provided and they'll be receiving useful information from the board if they're on that Breeze distribution list and the listserv list.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's something we should look at. One thing that we would want to look at there is, again, how many emails do we have in Breeze, right? There's going to be some duplicates. Obviously, there would be some Breeze emails that are also in the listserv emails, but I think there's going to be a lot that's not, right? Given what we've talked about, that we only had 6 people sign up for the listserv last year, and we licensed many more numbers than that. So I think a majority of our new licensees every year are not signing up for our listserv. Again, they're not getting the information that we're putting out. This would be a way to help solve that in the interim before we have a statutory email requirement. So I think it is something we should explore.
Yeah, and in that regard, regarding an interim solution, I don't know, do colleges who prepare people for the profession, do they customarily collect emails from their students? Can we gain those emails from them?
Well, so part of the problem there, and we run into this issue with students right now, this actually is maybe another example, maybe a small example of why an email requirement would be helpful. But there is 2 unique issues here, so I'll try to unpack it. One is, yes, I think most students, at least at the California colleges, I feel more comfortable speaking toward, do have, it's Berkeley, Ketchum, and Western. They do have a so-and-so at Western email, right? A so-and-so at Ketchum, so on and so forth. But how long that email account exists for once they're no longer a student, that would not be a question that I know the answer to, right? I don't know whether they would keep that school issued email in perpetuity. They do as some alumni benefit. I don't know. More principally, the problem we have right now is that was with the address of record, and it's actually why, from a student perspective, an email requirement would be more helpful. Students are often in a period of transition, right? You're living in one place, maybe your parents' house, so on and so forth, and you're moving. And a question that we commonly get from students around graduation is where their mail is going to get sent to. Where is my license going to get sent to, right? Because again, they're in that period of transition. Maybe their home state is a different state, but they're attending school in California. They have a license address here, but they're going to be moving back. We get this question a lot from students about move and where the mail is going to get sent to. So email would help solve that problem. But again, right now, using a student email, I don't know the rules that institutions have around how long that's valid for once you're no longer a student.
Certainly valid concerns.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And my only thought is, again, we're talking about an interim solution. And my thought would be, once they see the valuable information they gain through an email, if they move on and stop using the school email and use their own, even without a mandatory requirement, they may voluntarily contribute their new email because they want to continue receiving the information. They just don't know what they're not getting by never getting it.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions from our members? Let's go to public comment. Greg, you can start.
There's no members of the public in the physical location where I'm at.
I hope you don't feel lonely. I'm sorry.
I have other staff members here, but there's no members of the public.
That's good. All right, let's go to the internets.
We are open for public comment on agenda items 6 and 7. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We will call on people in the order we have requests. And now we're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
if I continue with the agenda, it's going to wrap things up. Are there any final comments from anybody on the board?
I had a question. I know it's not an area we can discuss, but the first topic of the day was essentially focused outward and not inward on new issues. And I want to just raise something for future discussion. Since we are in a committee that does general public outreach, we as a board have discussed safety issues, active shooter and the like. Previously, it is something that I think we can raise just for general public awareness in a future meeting. I happened to be at a library the other day and picked up a little handout from the LA Police Department on active shooter response. Since this is a continuing and widespread issue of public safety, I thought it was something we could at least do as an add-on to some topic in the future, should the board agree.
I
That
think
was
that's something to be taken up at the full board rather than at the committee level.
your choice. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, I think that's a full board item.
Fair enough.
Any other comments from members?
It's a side comment to Member Kleppa's. It's a sad commentary that is a very viable topic that is a viable outreach that needs to be done.
There is a department training on this that I know has gone around to at least a couple members. I can explore with council whether it would be appropriate to bring as a public agenda item.
Member Bragg?
Comments.
Excellent. All right. Well, Greg, you've got a few to-dos, and I'm happy to join you on the ones where we're going to work together, and hopefully we're going to unlock the magical content that makes people eager to engage with us. And if not, we will revisit this at a future meeting. So thank you all for your participation in today's Consumer Protection, Public Relations, and Outreach Committee meeting. We will now adjourn the meeting at the hour of, can I even read my watch? Let's go with 10:51 a.m.
Do we have to make a motion or no?
No motion to adjourn is necessary.
Fair enough. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No worries. I think we're in adjournment. Everybody have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
everybody.
We can.
Good to chat with everybody. Have a good weekend.